My name's Chris Robson. I'm the VP of Managed Services for QuestionPro, and this is our FAQ about synthetic data. What is synthetic data? It's a great question, and I think that's confusing a lot of people. Synthetic data is data that's somehow algorithmically generated rather than collected. This is something that's been done in the industry for many, many years, especially in machine learning, where we've used machine learning techniques or traditional statistical techniques to generate data algorithmically. What's changed nowadays is that we now have LLMs, and they are very powerful for generating this kind of data, and that's why everybody's talking about it at the moment. How is synthetic data generated? Most of the discussion, as I mentioned today, is about data that's been generated using LLMs. And it's very easy to ask an LLM, your ChatGPT or your Claude or your Copilot or whatever it is. It's very easy to just ask them to generate data. But that's not going to give you anything very useful. And so what we're doing nowadays more is to use a technique where we bring data to the LLM and use the LLM to generate more data like the data we have. And this is something that's very, very important, that we're not just asking the LLM to generate a bunch of data, but instead we're bringing data to it and saying, we would like more like this. So it's either extrapolating and maybe answering questions that weren't answered in the original data, or interpolating, where we're filling in where maybe we have data gaps. What are the main differences between synthetic data and real data? Well, real data is real, based on actual experiments. It's based on actual people, actual behaviors. And what we're doing with synthetic data is we're trying to say, yes, we have that, but if we need more, if we need to know more about what these people might have answered if we ask them something, or can we get more data like this one over here? So good synthetic data fills in those gaps and expands on what we have. Bad synthetic data may look very much like real data, but it's based on nothing, or it's based on just the model's interpretation of something. So you do have to be very careful. There are differences between synthetic data and real data, and we shouldn't confuse one for the other. What are the ethical considerations when using synthetic data? Well, LLMs like ChatGPT and Claude and Qwen and all the others, all of these actually have problems that they have a tendency to stereotype. It's in the nature of the way they're trained. It's in the nature of the way their data is being compressed in order to bring something valuable to us. And that stereotyping often is not a problem, but it can be a real problem. And so you have to be very aware. So if, for instance, you're trying to generate data on Gen Zs, you're not going to get through Gen Zs. You're going to get a stereotype of Gen Zs. And same is true with hard to reach groups. And one of the promises or the hopes with synthetic data is that maybe we can use it to understand hard to reach groups better. However, the ethical issues are that we may be stereotyping, and we just have to be very aware of that, and that we're staying close to real data and that we're not straying too far from that. Otherwise, these ethical considerations can be quite problematic. How should we evaluate synthetic data? That's a really good question, and this is one that many of us are working on at the moment, trying to get a better understanding of what we can do to really understand how good this data is that we're creating. And going back to what I said earlier about, you have to be using the synthetic data appropriately. You have to be using it at the right stage of your project. You have to make sure that the data is appropriate for the business decisions or the organizational decisions that you're trying to make. And so when we evaluate our data, we have to say, are we using it in a way that's appropriate for that? Now, we are putting a lot of work into cross-validation, the same thing that we've been doing for decades with machine learning, this idea of cross-validation, of taking test and training data sets to work out whether we are actually creating data that correctly follows what the group would actually say. So much more work needs to be done on that. We are doing the work on that, and many parts of the industry are working on that. But one thing I would actually say is to always remember, if something is too good, sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. And we know that there are people out there making claims that really aren't backed up by real data. So when we talk about evaluation, I would say, be sure that you're using it appropriately and ask the questions. Is this data solid enough for us to use for the particular use case we are doing? Thanks for watching this. My name's Chris Robson from QuestionPro, and this was the FAQ about synthetic data.